Nathan in Illinois, you're live with Dylan Burns and Hake.
Hey Dylan, how are you doing, sir?
Doing okay, all things considered.
Nice. So I've just got a question for you. Feel free not to answer it if it makes you uncomfortable or whatever. Are you a Christian?
It's a hard question for me to answer. I'm not particularly religious, but I was raised Christian, and my mother was Christian, and I try to keep a certain amount of my faith, if not only to keep a relationship with my mother who passed away a few years ago.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I mean, I'm a Christian. I was raised Catholic, and I sort of overcame that, and I realized it was sort of a method of control for the masses, and it's a sort of manipulation.
Can you? I'm sorry. Can you? When you say you overcame that, I'm not familiar with what that would mean.
What I've found is that Christianity is all about overcoming the world and overcoming different things that come at you, different lies, different thoughts, different ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've found about the Ukraine war is that it's nonsensical. Both Ukrainians and Russians descended from the same tribe, so it's if anything, Satan has you guys just exterminating each other, and I hope you can see that eventually.
Would you say that the American Revolutionary War was just a bunch of people killing their brothers? Because, you know, the British were actually, like, we were directly descendants of British colonialists. I mean, if anything, that would be more directly connected than how it is now in Ukraine. I mean, we were literally trying to break away from the government. The Ukrainian governments existed for 30-something years, and the Ukrainian Socialist Republic existed since the 50s. So, would you also say the American Revolution was a bunch of, you know, George Washington was controlled by demons or something?
I wouldn't say that. I don't know. I wasn't there. But you make a fair argument. I'll give you that.
I just think that there are differences between the Ukrainian people, whether it be their language, whether it be their literature, whether it just be their national identity. National identities form in so many different ways. Taiwan is a fantastic example of that. If you talk to young Taiwanese people, even though they do have deep cultural ties with mainland China, they very much identify as Taiwanese. And when it comes to their the liberal democracy and the certain freedoms that they've developed, and when you talk to Ukrainians, they have a very similar. Maybe it's not exactly the same with Taiwan, obviously, but they very much feel very proud of their language. They're very much proud of their literature, their poems, their history, and the fact that they want an independent state. Not to mention, the Ukrainian system of government is markedly different than the Russian system of government. And so if we're relating that back to the British, like the Revolutionary War, I think the battle of systems of government is also an important aspect here that's not talked about. There was a peaceful transfer of power between Zelensky and Petro Poroshenko, even though they were political opponents. That is significant. That shows the a democracy functioning as it should be, which is not the same case across the border. And so I think that many Ukrainians, definitely from my conversations with them, want to protect that, want to protect, in their mind, the victories of the Euromaidan revolution.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, at the same time, though, like, we should see that, like, because, I don't know, like, I met some Ukrainian girls the past weekend. They're immigrants. And they also had a Russian friend, and they were, like, pretty cool. I was just, like, giving them guff. I was, like, spitting out, like, nationalist, like, jargon sarcastically, like, kind of messing with them. It was kind of funny. I don't know what that has to do with anything. I just wanted to tell you that. Are you Ukrainian?
No, I'm not Ukrainian.
No? Okay. Yeah, so what are you doing there? You just enjoy, like, covering it, like, in your own way?
Well, I'm a war journalist, and I'm covering the war. I believe, what was it? I think it was the managing editor of the Washington Post. The 60s, he said this. But I believe that the first draft of history is journalism. That if something isn't documented, something isn't recorded, the picture isn't taken, then for the history books, it's like it never happened. And when you think of how many wars and conflicts and historical moments didn't have cameras, didn't have people recording stuff, wasn't properly documented, I think it's a real shame. And so if I can contribute to that historiography in a way, that documentation of history, then I feel like I'm contributing something to I think like the general knowledge of mankind, and I think that's a worthwhile contribution. I also do believe that the Ukrainians should have their own country, and I do agree with their self-defense. But when it comes to why I do what I do, that's the reason.
Yeah, you said something that just came back to me. You were talking about like Ukrainian people wanting their own branch or form of government and wanting it to operate independently, but I don't know. Like I can't with the widespread misinformation from both sides, Russia, Ukraine coming to America. I can't make a rational decision upon which is which because I don't know. I don't live there. So
Same. Seems to me like it maybe evil versus evil, man.
right, which is goes back to my original point of Satan just turning one against each other.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm not there. So anyway, yeah, I mean, I want to give you some wise advice that Jesse taught me. Even though your mom's not here anymore, I'd recommend you forgive her.
Yeah, Jesse told me that too when he interviewed me.
On the fallen state.
Yeah, I didn't know how I felt about it then, and I don't know how I feel about it now, because I don't know necessarily what I would be forgiving her for, and the things that I could surmise that I could forgive her for, I don't know how much that would really help me to, like,
Right.
say out loud, like, I forgive you for this thing that I'm not particularly feeling that I need to forgive you for.
Okay. Can I tell you how that's helped me?
Sure, I do want to respond to the evil versus evil thing.
Yeah, let
if
me
you
go
go
into
in-
this real quick. So when I forgave my mother, I started to see that I was becoming the man that God created me to be.
Gotcha.
And it's been continuously going forward and getting better and better.
Did you know, Nathan, that you resented your mother before that?
I had a feeling because I could tell how I resented women at large.
Because a lot of people don't know that they resent their mothers or that there's...
Yeah,
like
it takes a good deal of discernment and sight, but at the same time, like, one must understand that when you're able to see something and you don't know, but you can still see it, that's God moving within another.
How did you find out that you resented your mother? Other than just hating women, how did you find out that you resented your mother specifically?
Well, it just made sense because she was always like, I could see how, well, now looking back, I could see how I was always a mama's boy, and it just was disruptive to my life path for quite some time until I made that adjustment. Like right when I heard Jesse say that, I was like, oh, shoot.
Oh, so you were ready to hear it.
Sparks started flying. I was like, that's just what I needed.
Nice, man.
But, that's what he says. Suffer if you don't want to. But it seems like you're doing relatively well, Dylan, so.
It reminds me of what our prior conversation during Super Chats of can one be a wolf in sheep's clothing and not know it? I think that's the same thing of having resentment toward mother or parents and not realizing it or how much it's maybe affecting you in your other areas of life.
I remember. I think the one way that my familial upbringing, because there was a lot of, I would say, chaos in my familial upbringing because of my mother's, addiction and her homelessness. Like she was not behaving as a mother should behave, to put it bluntly. I think I don't know if I ever resented her, but I do know that in a way that I kind of tied my life to her in a way that, and her problems in a way that I don't know was the healthiest for me. Where anytime I would run into a problem in my, let's say, academics or my, political activism or something like that, I would be like, oh, in a way, I'm failing the progress that would be needed so nobody in the future will have to deal with. And I tied myself kind of in a way to Like, I need to fix the problem that caused this in my life. Like, I individually need to do that. And that was something that in the last few years, I feel like I've let go of a little bit more. And while, of course, I still want to contribute to the fight against addiction, I think, mentally put it all on my shoulders in the same way that I used to.
Right. Yeah, but yeah, I see that. But we're much greater creations than just mentally. You see, like, we have souls, we have hearts. And once you're able to put all of those in synchrony, I'm white privilege and slow. Once you're able to put everything in sync, that's when you're able to just sort of move your way closer towards God and know Him better. But yeah, that's just what I wanted to say. I felt obligated to share with you, Dylan.
I appreciate that. Nice change of pace, Nathan. Appreciate you, man.
I do want to say quickly in response
you
to
mentioned
something
you wanted to.
you said, and the evil thing, the two sides of evil.
Right, evil versus evil.
War is evil in and of itself because in war civilians die. In war, fathers are taken away from dinner tables. It is an inherently evil thing, and evil things happen within it. What we need to do, though, when wars are being fought for good and or bad reasons, is do our best to try to, contain those evils as much as possible. That's why you try your best to contain for collateral damage, and you just don't level every city you run into in a war, trying to kill everything in sight, right? We aren't like a Mongol horde, just raiding and pillaging, and that's not how a modern army should conduct itself.
Unless you're General
but evil
Sherman.
Unless you're Tucusmus Sherman and you want to purge the evil of rebellion from the South. But I do think that it is true that there have been crimes on both sides, but I think that there's a disproportionate amount of crimes on the Russian side. And even if there's evil in all sides of any military army, there was evil in American soldiers during World War I. There was evil in American soldiers during every war that ever existed, or any soldier and any army that ever existed. But that doesn't change, I think, the strength of their argument that they deserve independence, the strength of their argument that they deserve to have their own democracy if they want to, and that they have a right to their own land. All nations have their own land that they hold dear, that it's nearly holy to them. The idea of Americans giving up New York, no, give New York City over to the Germans, or give California. That would be ridiculous to us. Well, I understand some conservatives jokingly, though, but the idea of actually giving up large swaths of our territory where we don't know what's going to happen to those people. Are they going to be killed? Are they going to be kicked out of their homes? According to executive orders passed by Putin, they can be kicked out of their homes. They can be deported. They can lose their right to own property. I think that once you put that all on the table and you understand what the stakes of the war are, while you want to limit as much evil as possible, there's still an outcome I would like to see, which I think would be the least evil outcome. And that is Ukrainians get their own country. Ukrainians can run their own affairs as they want to with their own democracy, and the Russian soldiers go home. Just like how many of these colonial wars have ended in Algeria, in the Congo, in Vietnam, in Afghanistan. Many colonial or any of these wars overseas have ended, and they don't always end the same way, but they have a similar beat to it.
Okay, yeah. Well, I noticed you said disproportionately Russia is acting in crime, having war crimes.
Yeah, it's to a certain extent. I think it's cultural, but I also think it's also just about a question of means. If you have more bombs and you have a stronger air force, then obviously you're probably going to be able to commit a lot more war crimes. Plus, the war is on Ukrainian soil. It's going to be pretty hard for a Ukrainian soldier to go into Russia and start, extrajudicially killing Russians. Not that I think Ukrainian soldiers particularly want to do that, but if you're not in Russia, you can't really do that, can you?
Right. What do you think about women serving in the front line in combat?
I think it's fine. I've met women who serve in territorial defense in Zaporozhye. I've met the thing that's really crazy about Ukraine, and it really kind of angers me because people sort of hyper focus on like the super ultra nationalist sections of the military. Is the Ukrainian military is unbelievably diverse from so many sections of society, whether it be Crimean Tatars, whether it be people from Eastern Ukraine, Western Ukraine, Ukrainian speakers, Russian speakers, men, women, Romani people, all sorts of different people that have signed up to join, and that does include women who have also joined the armed forces. A lot of women at checkpoints. Military checkpoints, in my experience.
My 2 cents on that. So it may seem well intended, but ultimately, if the Russians are sending prisoners to fight in the front lines who haven't seen women in years, and Ukraine is sending women to the front lines, they're being set up for failure and humiliation. Like, if they get caught captive, God only knows how horribly they're going to be treated. So. It may seem well intended, but I mean,
would you apply that same standard to like Jewish soldiers during World War II? Because there were Jewish American soldiers who went to Europe and fought the Nazis. But if they were caught and they found like a Star of David tattooed on them or like a necklace with the Star of David, I assume they'd probably get worse treatment. But I think ultimately that's up to the individual. If you've decided that knowing that the army you're fighting hates you or will treat you in a certain way different because of who you are, that will actually, in a way, be a motivator for many people because they feel like, well, I don't want these guys to occupy my village. If this is what they'll do to me on the battlefield if we fight for a year or two, the last thing is I want these people in charge of my village, in charge of my city, in charge of my country. If we're scared of these soldiers even touching women or being near women because of what they could do to a woman POW, what does that say about them being in control of major metropolitan areas full of hundreds of thousands of civilians? For them, they are the last line between I don't know how to properly describe it.
I get your
but
point.
Pillaging, raping, and murder, they're the last line between their families and that type of violence. And so many of them make the decision that they'll go through with it anyway. I mean, I talk to gay soldiers who fight in the Ukrainian military. They give me a very similar sentiment about, if I get captured and they find out, I am fucked. Sorry, I can't language. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, kids. Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate you, man.
All right.
Great call.
Appreciate you guys, bud.
All right.